Well, hello and welcome everybody to When the Dutch Went to Space. And it's a special episode because we are not going to space today. And in fact, I wanted to take this opportunity to run you through my build process and show you how I come up with the way I build my launchers, in particular the launchers. And yeah, maybe you can learn something from it, or maybe you can give me some tips on how to do it better. And the occasion is something special. So the occasion is the design of Europa 5. I haven't really decided on the final name yet. So it might be called Europa 5. There's also another name on the table which is called VAPAL. And I am going to explain you in a bit why I think that might actually be a better name. But before we do that, let's just jump into it and explain to you how we're building stuff. And I'm not going to build it exactly as it is over here. I'm going to tear this one down and then show you how I've put things together. And in doing so, I'll help you through my thinking, hopefully, and how things are put together. So let's just tear this one a little bit apart and let's start on the top with our new and improved rocket. And why are we building a new improved rocket? I mean, that's an interesting thing to talk about first. So as you may know, the Americans have their Saturn V, which launches about 100-120 tons to low Earth orbit, and the Russians have their N1, 95 tons to low Earth orbit. They'll have Energia doing at least 100 tons in the future. And Europe, and particularly the Dutch, but I think by now we've switched more or less to Europe, doesn't have anything that comes close to that launch capability. We never needed it in terms of the lunar program, and as I was going through RP1 I realized that I would not be able to build something that powerful in the amount of time that I would have to actually get to the moon. So we went to the moon on Europa, Europa 2 and 3, which are 20 tons to 33 ton launchers to low Earth orbit, and we really had a very tight delta V budget compared to what the Americans could do. But it's time to build a heavier launch vehicle, and the occasion is the Vulcan engine. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Vulcan, Vulcan is the engine that powers Ariane 5. Now Ariane 5 can do 20 tons to low Earth orbit, but we will do something special. Let's start at the beginning. We start out with a payload, and as you can see here I have a procedural tank that I filled with, I don't know what I filled it with, lead or something like that. It's basically, it serves as a weight. So as you can see down here, this is exactly 10 ton. And on the left hand side in my sub-assembly category, you can find 100 kilograms, 300 kilograms, 1 ton, 10 ton. So let's put 10 of them together and get down to, well, 99.9999. I'll run with it. Yeah, so that's the mass, the payload that we're going to push to orbit. And I like to use a simulator, so I have an idea of the payload that we can actually do, and I can build my design around it. And you saw the fairings pop up and get a little bit larger. This means that they have not been locked into place yet. And you can use the offset tool to come up with a fairing shape that you like. You could say, well, I want the fairings to be, ooh, this is super big. This might be a little bit too much. I want to have large fairings, or I want them to be smaller. I want them to, whatever your desire is, you can play with these little offset tools and make a fairing that you like. And if you think this is my fairing, this is what it should be, you go to right menu button and you lock the fairing shape. And this is important because as we develop our craft, the shape of the fairing is going to change, and you don't want to build new fairings all the time. If you can see this in the RP1 module, it says you need to tool these parts. It's going to take us about 6,000 to tool them, and to save you a little bit on cost while doing that. It's not actually that much. It was worse in the beginning, but hey, so this is sort of how we work with the fairing and make sure a payload fits inside. And yeah, just below the fairing we have the avionics module. I like to use a configuration menu and switch it to the best type I can get. This is near Earth avionics. The Europe 2 and 3 actually use deep space avionics, so we can switch off the avionics when we're en route to the moon. But because of the engine that we're going to use, we won't be able to do that. So why spend money and power on it where you can also work with a near Earth control course. I can see I have a newer one that came up. I can actually do that and upgrade it a bit. But let's leave that for now. We have some mass figures here below how much we want to control with this tank, and this is based of course on what you put below it. And this is the wrong one, I need this one. So the final stage on this rocket is going for about 120 tons, and you could see we can do 300, so we're good. Oh, it starts off with 280 tons, and you can also see it below is 280, so I basically rounded up, so if we have a slightly heavier payload I don't need to upgrade my avionics. And this is as we go. The tank below it is a isogrid structured tank, not the most expensive tanks. I've taken the best fuel tank type I can get, which is at this moment refined aluminum. Yes, I should invest more in material science and get better tanks, but for now this is good. And I'd rather use this than a balloon tank because it allows me to add MLI layers which insulate the tank. And they don't add up like 200 kilograms, but they keep the liquid hydrogen and the liquid oxygen, but in particular liquid hydrogen, very cool. So during the boost phase when we're moving to orbit, we don't lose anything. I think that's worked at 200 kilograms. And below it you can find the Vulcan engine. Now, you may wonder why is he using a lower stage engine at upper stage, and this is because this is the most powerful hydrogen engine that I have. And you can see the thrust ranges somewhere between 1,000 and by the time we activate these babies they're going to be around 1,350 kilonewtons in vacuum, and that's quite a lot because the only alternative that I have is the RZ20. Let's see if I can find it. Here is the RZ20, and the RZ20 only produces let's see, at vacuum about 70 kilonewtons. So this thing is about 20 times more powerful, which means we would have 40 RZ20s to achieve the same thing. I mean, it's just the fuel is so incredibly heavy compared, and the payload is heavy compared to what we had on the previous launches, that we need something really powerful. These two will burn. As you can see up here, I have the MacJab Delta V stats. These two together will burn for 250 seconds. And looking at the rated burn time, 580. There's plenty of time, so why not add mass to it and more fuel? Well, that has everything to do with the TWLR, like the thrust to weight ratio that we're getting from this. I could probably burn this on one engine. Yeah, this looks good. And now you can see TWLR is 0.97, and basically that means that within a couple of minutes of burning fuel we will get a TWR that is high enough and actually get us to space. Yeah, this looks good. Below this whole monstrosity is a huge additional fuel tank. Again, isogrid structure. And this time we could add MLI layers to it. We could also forego it. You can see it doesn't matter, almost like it's 2 meters per second difference. Let's keep the layers in there and make sure nothing boils off. Boil off, especially with large quantities, is typically worse than the additional weights of the fairings. And on the bottom you can see we have 6 Vulcan engines. So this is a beast. This is comparable to SLS, though SLS only has 4 engines currently, RS-25s, also hydrogen engines. So pretty similar to that, but the Block B I think has 6, so there is a variant of SLS that has 6 engines. So it's very comparable to what NASA is currently developing. And these babies give us more than enough thrust, about 1,000 newtons, and but not quite enough. So this thing burns for about 350 seconds, well within the burn time of the engines, but we lack thrust, meaning it won't get off the pad. You need something to get it off the pad. And this is where the boosters come in. These are the original boosters from Ariane 5. And we're going to add 4 of them. And these 4 are going to basically give us the push to get off the pad. Here we go. And though it would work in the sequence, we're also going to fire up the main engines. And now you can see in the Delta V stats, we lift off the pad with a thrust to weight ratio of 1.7. And by the time the main boosters are burned out, we already have a TWR of 1.03, which is enough to get us going. It also sees that we have 9,650 meters per second, which should be enough to get us into orbit. And there we go. Of course, this typically goes through a lot of adding and removing stuff, but this is basically the design process that I go through. Well, we add a bit of decals on it to make it look pretty, and if you change stuff around, the decals get buried in the design. But if you save and reload the craft, it is going to be there. Weird bug. Yeah, and of course we have some kind of a platform that we want to add to it. I'm not going to show you how to do that. I'm going to show, yeah, I'll show you, which is very finicky to get it right in the correct spot. And now you have to rotate some stuff around to make sure everything fits, but basically this is it. Check your staging. First stage means we are letting go of these fuel pipes, fuel lines, then the launch clamps, and everything would fall apart. So what we need to do is add all the engines there, and especially the liquid fueled engines, because they take about 3 to 4 seconds to spin up. So we're dropping the, we could decide to move these even up here. So we're dropping the fuel lines, we're dropping that fuel line, lining up the liquid engines, and once they have thrust, we release the entire rocket from its pad, including the clamps that are holding it down, and we ignite the boosters to really get her off. I think I need to move my boosters a little bit around. So in real life I would move the boosters around, but now I'm just going to move the platform. It barely fits. That's a very tight fit. Yeah, but it's going to work. As we progress and the boosters burn out, we're launching these little head caps, which means there are little solid rocket motors pulling the boosters away from the core stage, and then we're releasing them. Once that core stage has burned out, the second stage ring ignites. We lose the fairing in between, and we light up these 2 Vulcans, bringing the whole thing into orbit. Will it work? I sincerely hope so. You will have to wait and see until a future episode to see if this will actually work and if it's going to be called Europa 5 or something else. Because I mentioned I have an idea of working with this design and actually using it earlier. In the lower right corner you can see that this thing weighs about 2 million tons, which is too much for my current launch infrastructure. So my heaviest launch infrastructure can do 1 million to 1.3 million tons, so we need something more, which we don't have. So we need to build a new launch system, and that is going to take 2 years. And that's exactly why you haven't seen this design yet. It would take 2 years to build this baby. And we're actually building this, don't worry, we're building a new launch pad to launch it. But in the meantime, I also want to launch stuff. And I thought about it long and hard, well, maybe not that long, but I thought about it and said, well, maybe once we've tooled up everything and prepared everything, there is a way of actually using all that infrastructure and tooling in a different way. But we may have to drop some of the mass. So what happens if we drop 30 tons? And we have got 70 tons of payload. And I was actually aiming for 50, but found out it will also work with 30. And I'm just going to grab a completely built rocket now. And here we go. This is the exact same rocket, only now it only has 2 side boosters. And if you would click the center stage, you would see that it's only filled up to 89%. And the upper stage is still completely fueled, but it's the exact same rocket. But now it only weighs, oh, there we go. Can you please show me how much it was? 1.2 tons, meaning it can be launched from Launch Complex 6, which is exactly what we're going to do. So we've designed our heavy lift launch vehicle, but we can actually use it in different variants. And yes, this is an expensive one. This is an expensive one of boosting 70 tons to low Earth orbit, but it's not a bad design. And just to show you a different design, 80,000. So like our current Aria Europa 3 rocket will boost 33 tons to low Earth orbit at a cost of 30,000, and this new design can do 70 tons at 80,000. So you could probably launch 2 of these in favor of one of those. But sometimes your payload just is that heavy and there's a cost associated with it. It's expensive stuff, and the cost comes from the fuel and from the engines that we're using. So I was contemplating turning this into a smaller vehicle, but yeah, it's an intermediate stage to help us get heavier payloads to orbit. And had we built that using our existing technology stack, not alone would we have needed quite a lot more tanks to actually do it, and a whole lot more of engines to do it, but the total weight would also be enormous, because this rocket weighs almost as much as the other one, and that's because kerosene basically is much heavier. Anyway, I hope you found this video interesting and learned a bit about my building process. You are going to see these in the near future in an episode coming to you. Thanks for watching.